Hello, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me, I've got Sebastian and we're going to be talking about charisma.
Oh, yes.
What is it? How do you get it? All of those things. I never do bios, Seb.
I quite like that. Nice, unconventional way to start. I like it.
I never do bios. I just say to people, where can people find you?
And the best place you can find me is on TikTok. I have over 2 million views. I've done hundreds of videos all around the concept of charisma, and that is just simply at Art of Charisma. However, if you feel particularly passionate about reaching out to me, you can go to my website or just email me at artofcharisma@outlook.com.
And we were talking about this just before we went live. Your TikTok is just excellent because you take certain things that are in society, growing up, learning about, so something simple like, what do you say when you get in a taxi? Or what do you, as you said, how do you become the person? How do you're in a meeting? How do you get listened to?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a whole bunch of crumbly people like me in there, and they're, and what you want is to say, no, actually, I have this view, I have this opinion, and I want to share it. And what you do is you take these complex subjects, and of course, TikTok is quite an art form. And what you do is you squeeze it down into bite-sized pieces of content, and they are just excellent. I just sat there and watched that one, and then watch that one. You just sucked me in. It was fantastic.
Well, thank you so much, Tim, for the vote of confidence and also the heads up there, because I really quite like that. Yeah, the thing is with charisma, there's so many different avenues and there's so many different elements that it can impact people's lives, whether that's their element of leadership, whether that's they're wanting to become a better leader, whether that's they want to have a business partner and they want to network better, or they're looking for that guy or girl in the bar, in the nightclub to have that future partner with. It can impact in lots of different areas. The idea is that it's in so many different things. It's how we talk, it's how we act, it's how we speak to people, it's the tone. So it can feel quite overwhelming. So what I always aim to do in the TikTok is take key little bits, little situations, and really try to boil it down to what is the core elements of this. How do we keep conversations going? Yes, I can talk about all the theory and the technical bit, but I want to give people little bite-sized bits that they can use instantly. That's what I love about it. So that's really where the whole idea and the format came from.
So I don't know if I'm allowed to mention about your past, Seb.
Of course, I'm an open book, Tim. I'm an open book.
But you used to be, you used to be a second-hand car salesman.
Absolutely. And
but at the top end, Mercedes and Maserati.
Yes, exactly. And you know what? That experience was absolutely fantastic because when you're working in sales, there's different tiers to it. There is that person that we can all think of, the sleazy used car salesman, the slick back hair, the big gold watch, and it just makes us all cringe inside. And for me, when you're at the top end, it's not about the price. It's not about the qualities as such. It's about the relationships you have with customers. And that's really what instilled in me when I was working for those brands. Ultimately, everything boils down to the relationship you have. When you leave the house, you'll have a relationship with your barista in Starbucks. You will have a relationship with your partner. You'll have a relationship with your boss. The taxi driver, albeit quite a short relationship, you will still have it there. So it's so imperative in your day-to-day life.
Because my background is sales, and I was always and I've always been in new business sales. So for me, basically building trust within seconds is so important. And it doesn't matter what level of sales that you're in, you've got to basically build that trust. And in a way, what you're providing, certainly with your TikTok channel and through charisma, is that you're giving that ability to connect with someone, and for them to, at the point of shaking your hand, if we still do that, is that you get that level of trust.
Absolutely. And you know what? Trust is actually a real important one, because some people might ask themselves, like, how do I get people to trust me more? How do I get people to kind of buy into what I'm saying? You might look at people throughout history and they were able to influence and persuade millions of people. And how do we do it? Well, one of the most common ones, you said, their handshake, but I'll go on one step further and say hand gestures. Hand gestures and just themselves are able to convey so much trust. Now, the science and theory behind it comes from like neuroscience, when we were cavemen. And essentially, if we were cavemen and I saw you approaching my tribe, I would look at your hands and you'd look for, has he got a weapon? Has he got a spear? Has he got this? Has he got that? And then you would look at those factors and see, okay, is this a friend or foe? And fast forward to 2023, that happens as well. It's the same with eye contact. Eye contact is so important when it comes to building trust with somebody, because when you make eye contact with somebody, it releases a chemical in the other person's brain, which essentially is a trust-building hormone. So when you hear it, it's almost become canned now, like, oh, make eye contact, make eye contact. But when you know the theory behind it, you understand why it's important.
So what is charisma?
Wow, great question right off the stop. You know what? I've done lots of studying into this, and it's fascinating. Charisma originally was something that was described by the Greeks back in the day. Greeks believed it was called a divine gift, which I think is beautiful. However, it's almost given it this really bad reputation that it's almost something special or like a superpower. But trust me, we can all see when the magic happens. For me, to break it down, charisma is just a set of small, soft skills that, when applied at the same time in the right situation, can become charisma. And those soft skills are leadership, making good first impressions, confidence, great conversations, and you can even throw into the of emotional intelligence, likability, humor. It can go on and on, but ultimately those are the core ones there. So when people say, there's a lot of myths around charisma, like, it's something you've either got or you haven't got.
Is it something you're born with? Or
is it something you're born with? And absolutely not. Charisma is a skill, and like any skill, it can be practiced, it can be honed, it can be perfected to a degree. Now, there is people naturally who are born with that sort of natural instinct better than others, but that's not to say they can't improve it whatsoever. Not at all. So charisma's had a lot of myths around it. And so I'm kind of here flying the flag to say, no, it's all these little soft skills. And charisma kind of also gets put into the camp of like likability. And what a lot of people don't know, a big question I guess is like, why should I care what people think? Why should I be likable? Well, people who are likable on average earn more money than people who are unlikable. So if you're looking at my career and you're looking at your business and say, right, well, yes, I can improve this element or this hard skill, like becoming this person or studying this at university, start with your likability and what you can do to influence and persuade people. And ultimately, you'll naturally start earning more and getting more promotions and all that jazz. So yeah, it's a fascinating subject that's been around for centuries.
I think it's something that, being likable is so important because of the fact that you'll get opportunities. People will say, oh, yeah, I know this person, you need to go and talk to them. And whether that works out or not, it doesn't matter. But those conversations will help you, and those contacts will help you.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the old sort of say, when you mentioned car sales, the old thing was people buy from people. And obviously in a technological world, they're actually trying to recreate these sort of characteristics through the computer, through customer service. And so, when you get on the phone to a bank, you have a kind of expectation of what that experience will be like, but they're constantly trying to use these charismatic traits to make sure that you're having a better experience, so that you're building relationships, so that you can have just this warm, fuzzy feeling, And I mean, think back to times where, you're at a hotel, or you've had good customer service, or you've worked with someone that you've absolutely loved, or you've been at a dinner party and you've really connected with somebody. Ultimately, you'll really find that all they were doing was getting you to open up and talk about yourself.
Well, that's the thing about the trick I've always been told about dates, isn't it? Which is not going on a date with a man or a woman. Is basically what you do is you get them to talk about themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds almost it's so simple. It's almost not true. It almost sounds like, but ultimately, let's think about this. You know, if you're wanting to build a relationship with somebody at networking events, really, what you're wanting to do is to open them up and start to release those chemicals in their head, their dopamine, their serotonin, all these sort of things that gets flowing when we start asking interesting, exciting conversations. I know British people love talking about the weather, and on average, British people talk about the weather 6 months of their life. So if you boil down all the time that we spent talking about, oh, the weather's rubbish and this is brilliant, it's too hot, it's too cold, 6 months of our lives, I'm sure we can find something more exciting and more engaging to talk about than just the weather. So ultimately, that's what it comes down to. So charisma.
Do you think that? Do you think though that knowing all these things, it's being a bit manipulative?
You know, charisma has actually had a really bad reputation, and sort of the principles and philosophy that I try to instill is having a place of authenticity and being genuine. Ultimately, that's the core thing at it. People are actually really good lie detectors with that gut instinct that you feel. So when something's not right, then it's going to sound very canned. A great example is a fake smile. You know, you can tell that sort of, that cheesy, cringy smile. You can tell it a mile off. Another great example when we're talking about authenticity, sometimes I tell people, if people have this insecurity of wanting to be liked by others, so a way that you can harness this is to sort of use word phrases like, I was just thinking about you. Tim, I was just thinking about you the other day, and I was just really enjoying. And I just thought, we're doing this podcast. People get that warm, fuzzy feeling inside, but when it's not genuine, when it's not sincere, it feels like that canned response. It feels canned, and that's almost like a canned laughter. When someone's not actually laughing, you can tell, and it feels weird. So ultimately, charisma can be used for good and evil. It's just in the same camp as power, money, success, science. It can all be used for good and evil, but ultimately, what I try to instill is this idea of authenticity and being genuine.
So how do we get it? Apart from going to your TikTok channel and watching your TikTok videos.
Wow, another great question, Tim. I'm actually really liking these. Charisma, some people think it's this indescribable, unattainable thing, but ultimately what you've got to do is think of it like a process and really try to systemize it. And so what we can try to do is start at the beginning. So a first impression. Let's really look at what makes a good first impression. So that's what we're wearing. I like to use the technique called the chameleon effect, which is really try to tailor what your clothes are and your approach to the situation. Okay, wearing a suit and a big flashy watch might be appropriate at a job interview for a bank, but actually at the barbecue with friends, it's going to come across as arrogant. So really look at those sort of elements there. Then we're moving into initiating conversations. How do we get off of that first awkward moment of initiating a conversation, getting over that fear of rejection? How are we able to say, hi, my name is Sebastian, and then start to get past that transitional phase into conversations that we actually enjoy? And then we're moving into that section there about good conversations, engaging conversations, really getting under the skin of the person, and then being able to keep conversations going. And then having one or two good stories, being able to throw those good stories in and out and pepper them throughout your conversation. And then ultimately, it's how do we maintain that through weeks, months, years of knowing somebody. And that's ultimately what it is, really condensed and boiled down into one section there. There isn't one silver bullet, and then once you do that, you can have charisma. It's multiple different things that you're doing. And I use the phrase, practice in public, perfect in private. And I give the example of stand-up comedy. A stand-up comedian won't know it's funny until they're out there practicing it. Chris Rock, you'll hear him, he'll say, I went to this gig and I bombed and I went to the next gig. And ultimately, all that practicing eventually had the big performance. So ultimately, you take these techniques, you take these ideas and concepts, practice them with friends, family, people you interact with on a day-to-day basis, see what works, what doesn't work, come back, refine it, and then go again. And that's ultimately where the practice comes from.
And I know that we all have to make a good first impression. And I agree with you, that can be right down to the clothes that you're wearing. as you say, if you're going out when you've got a big gold watch on or something like that, in many cases, it's not seen as it would seem as arrogant.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, what in terms of making a good first impression, what other things could we be doing?
One of the things we could be doing is ultimately what we could be doing in terms of a good first impression. We talked about eye contact, we talk about hand gestures, we talk about clothing. The introduction is also quite important as well. And some people really struggle about that first, what do I say to this person? Once again, there's no silver bullet. Saying, hey, my name's Sebastian, hey, my name is Tim, is always tried and true, and that's very good. But a key thing that I like to do to sort of initiate conversation is the compliment and question. That's something that I really love. So compliment and question. What's that actually? Yeah, I'll give you an example. So you could say something like, Tim, you have great style. I love your shirt. You have great style. Do you work in fashion? And then you would respond and go, no, I don't work in fashion. I work in... Say that again, sorry.
I was going to say, I do actually, yes. I'm joking.
You're very stylish. But then I can also look at you and say, well, you've got the graph in the background. I can't remember the music player in the background. Are you interested in music, or what music do you listen to? So that really simple compliment and question. It's just a really easy technique to try and break the ice within the first moment. Now, you can use something that they've got on them and use their environment, like, oh, you've got great style is a great example, or you look really fit or really athletic. Do you go to the gym? Do you play football? Or you could say, if they're wearing like business attire, oh, you seem very professional. What's it you do for a living? And just use it to sort of break in that first initial awkward moment. The reason why that's charismatic is because you're showing an interest in the person. And once again, it all backed with authenticity, being genuine, and that you're able to then sort of take that in and lead it on to another conversation. So if they say, I don't work in fashion, but I work in sales, or I work in tech, or I work in this, and then it leads into a conversation. Go on.
Holding good conversation. What do you think is good conversation?
Good conversation, boiled down, is getting the person to talk about something that they are genuinely interested and passionate in. You can do that through a number of different ways. One of the easiest ways to do is, once you've learned a little bit about the person, getting them to open up about themselves can be easier said than done. But let's just say we give that example there, that I don't work in fashion, I work in tech. The idea that you could say there is getting their opinion or advice on something to do with what they've just told you. So, for example, if they worked in tech, they said, what, I really want to get your advice. What do you think of Elon Musk's rebrand of Twitter? And then go into it that way. It might not be something that they're genuinely interested in burning at that moment. It's very rare that you strike gold right at the beginning, but getting it's an engaging question to get the ball rolling. So asking their opinion or advice on something, or to use another example there, is to, if you want to get their advice, you could say, okay, so you work in tech. I want to get your advice. I've always wanted to start a tech business. How do I go about it? Or what's the sort of next up and coming trend? Or what's this? Or what's that? And that's a real nice way to get into those sort of engaging conversations.
And in terms of, I think that's great advice in terms of holding and keeping conversation. You mentioned storytelling. Having some stories. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'll go back just a quick second. Another quick tip about keeping conversations, just while it's fresh in my mind here, is what a lot of people do is people sometimes fall in the trap of asking questions. And they go, what do I ask next? What do I ask next? And so they go, where are you from? What do you do for a living? Another thing to do is just to give more information than's necessary. We call it spreading ammunition. So Tim, if you were to ask me, what do I do for a living? I could say, I'm a consultant. And while that might perfectly be a normal response, it's not really giving too much information. But if I said, I'm a consultant that works in London, specifically with IT companies and startups, there's so many different bits there that you can pick up to ask me to start to open up, and eventually you'll feed into a conversation. But going back to your question there about storytelling, the biggest mistake I see people with storytelling is they tell the good bit first. So what they say is they go, did I tell you the time that I met Beyonce? And they go, no. And they go, well, I met Beyonce. And you go, oh, right, okay. So you've already think of a comedian telling a joke. They don't tell the punchline straight away. They build it up. The beauty about storytelling is everybody's got a story. Everybody has one good story or one good anecdote. And if you don't, then you're a unicorn. You really need to get out of the house. You need to be an experienced people. But everybody has that golden nugget story. And the best thing you can do is back to what we were saying about practice in public, perfect in private. Start telling people the story. What you want to look at when you're telling a story is really cut away all the fluff. So don't say things like, yeah, it was on Tuesday. Was it Tuesday? Tuesday or Wednesday? Wednesday? If it doesn't really impact the story, really just cut it away. Next bit is really start the story as close to the climax as possible. Some people start like miles away, like, oh, it was a sunny day on Thursday and this happened and this happened and this happened. And ultimately it takes ages to get to the point. And in that time, people have lost interest or you've gone on a tangent. So ultimately start the story right at the bits where it's all about to happen and have a real big impact. So that's just some quick tips that people can use when it comes to telling stories and really thinking about it, what it is. Stories don't necessarily need to be funny. They don't need to be anything, like they don't need to be funny, which is another trap that people fall into. It just needs to be engaging and lead on to something. But a great way that you can introduce a story is by saying the phrase, "This reminds me of." That's probably my biggest bulletproof vest that people can use in conversations, that you can use if there's an awkward silence or you don't know what to do. I'll give you an example again about the taxi driver. You're in a taxi and you're driving through, you're listening to things on the radio, you're passing buildings on the street, you're passing people as well. And something might just catch your eye. It may be a song playing like Beyonce. God, this reminds me of the time that I actually went to go see Beyonce in such and such a place. And then you're able to go into your story or your anecdote. Or you might pass a building, you might pass the Shard. And you go, God, I remember I was watching an episode of The Apprentice and I was just thinking. So that phrase, "this reminds me of," will really help you get out of any difficult situation, but also help you get into your story.
Sebastian, thank you so much for coming on. It's been really fascinating talking about charisma. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this, because you're the only person that I've ever spoken to over since 2016 that I started this podcast that's ever said, I want to come and talk about charisma. So as soon as you came, it was like, I'm doing this.
Good. I'm excited. Great sale. Great sale. But charisma is a fascinating subject. I would recommend anybody who's listening to this or watching this to really delve deep into it and see how they can harness it themselves and how it can apply to their own situation.
And I highly recommend your TikTok channel, which is Art of Charisma, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's not just me dancing. I promise you that. It's not just me dancing or lip syncing or anything like that. It's definitely got some value there that people will find.
And so the Art of Charisma, your TikTok channel, is the best place to find you otherwise?
Absolutely. You can leave a comment just saying, hey, I came from Tim's podcast, or you can get through me on the Art of Charisma website, where I blog every week about charisma and how you can improve it. But TikTok, if you really want that really snappy, punchy, snackable content, that's the best place for it.
Sebastian, thank you so much for coming on and talking today. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you so much, Tim.
You're welcome.